Hello, I'm Tortor Smith and I'm a stop motion animator and creative entrepreneur. Welcome to this Halloween themed tutorial on how to sculpt a pumpkin. So what you're going to need to sculpt a pumpkin is some plasticine. I use Nuplast, which is a great brand of plasticine. There's a link in my description if you're interested in buying that. You will also need a pair of scissors or a knife and some small tools like a pin or Amtech tools, which are listed in my description also. Now, I don't have much of the bright orange colour, so for the core of my pumpkin I'm using a terracotta, which I had a lot more of. Now first of all, you want to mould this into a spherical shape, like a pumpkin shape, and I have pushed it down onto the table to give it a flat base, and now I'm poking a pin's round head into the top to give a dent where the stalk will eventually go. Now, I am going to be using my brighter orange plasticine as the outer layer of my pumpkin, and what I'm doing is flattening this out. Now you could roll this out with a rolling pin. I'm a bit lazy, and to be honest, pumpkins are pretty rustic, so it doesn't need to be completely flat. So I'm just squishing it out with my hand. Now here you can see I am measuring the length of the pumpkin from top to bottom, and I've just marked that with my pin roughly, and I'm going to cut out a petal shape from the bright orange plasticine colour. Now you can see that this petal fits from the top to the bottom of the pumpkin as we just measured, and to cover the entire pumpkin we want to make 6 to 7 of these orange petals. So the quickest and easiest way of doing this is to put the first petal that we have cut out on top of the flat piece of plasticine and cut around to make a second petal, and so on until we have our 6 or 7 bright orange petals. Now these petals will form the outer layer of the pumpkin, and you don't have to make your pumpkin like this. You could have used bright orange for the entire thing, but I think why waste a nice colour when you can use a muggy old colour in the middle and save your lovely clean bright orange and use less of it. I think it's pretty efficient way of using your nice colours. Do you not agree? So we have now got roughly the right amount of petals. So the idea is, here you can see I'm placing the first one down, squashing it onto the core of the pumpkin, and placing the second one next to it, leaving a very small gap. You want to leave probably about 1 millimetre between those petals, just to give the shape that a pumpkin has. It's kind of like got sections to it, and if you find that a petal doesn't quite fit, you can always cut it a bit thinner. It's a nice thing about plasticine, it's very flexible, it's open to you making mistakes. Now I'm just re-denting the top where the stalk will go using the pin head, and now I'm using my Amtech tool to define those gaps in between the petals slightly more. Now this is literally just pulling the tool along with a slight amount of pressure to create a dent, and then I'm using the edge and pulling that top layer colour across to spread it out and conceal a bit more of that inner darker terracotta colour. If you're smoothing down the edges, as you can see here, it gives a more natural look like a pumpkin. And now to neaten this up and add a bit of finer detail, I'm going to use my pin. And as you can see, if you use the edge of the length of the pin and carefully drag it along, you will smooth down any imperfections in those creases. You can also go back in with the bigger tool and similar action, drag it and smooth it. Now everybody will have their own way of doing this. This is my way. It's not necessarily the best or the way that will work for you, but it's just a cheap and simple way of making a pumpkin. So On the sides of a pumpkin, you also have a vein-like texture. Now, to create this, I'm just dragging the pin along. Now, you don't want to use the point of the pin because it tends to kick up little bits of plasticine, which looks a bit messy. Instead, you use the side of the pin and drag the whole length along, and you'll get very neat veins. If you do get any jagged edges, you can always smooth it down with your thumb just by stroking it. Now, I'm going to make the stalk. You can use green or brown for this. I decided to mix a little bit of green with the brown because I wanted a slightly darker green colour. And the top of a pumpkin stalk has a slight indentation, so I've used the top end of the pin to create this, and the stalk also has a vein-like texture along its length, so I've just been pulling my pin along to create the veins. Now, I am just using my fingers to smooth down the edges of the pumpkin, like I said before. If there are any imperfections, your fingers and thumbs are really good at smoothing down the plasticine surface. Now here you can see I'm just adding the final touch, which is the stalk to the top of the pumpkin, and it fits nicely in that little dent I made earlier. The end of the pumpkin has slightly lost its shape, so I'm just reshaping that with the end of my pin. If you liked finding out how to sculpt a pumpkin and you would now like to learn how to animate the pumpkin bouncing, then you can watch my next video, and as you can see here, I've made pumpkins of different dimensions to make a pumpkin bounce, and this is going to be a video that focuses on the principles of squash and stretch and how essentially a ball bounces, but instead I have decided to do it with the pumpkin because it's more fun, why not, and it's almost Halloween, so I thought it was quite appropriate. If you're interested in that video, you can see a sneak peek of what the bouncing pumpkin looks like, and that video will be linked on the end card, so you can go directly to it and get bouncing with your pumpkin.